The experience a man goes through when he realizes that your self-respect has become more valuable to you than your desire to keep him close is never something simple or ordinary. It is not a small emotional reaction that disappears after a few moments. Instead, it becomes a powerful psychological moment that challenges the way he viewed the relationship and the role he believed he had in your life. In that exact moment, something inside him begins to break because he is not only feeling the distance between you, he is realizing that he no longer has the same influence over your emotions, your decisions, or your sense of worth. This message is not created just to give you temporary motivation or a few comforting words that make you feel better for a short time. The purpose of this message is to reveal the deeper psychological transformation that takes place when a woman finally reaches a point where she can no longer abandon herself just to maintain a connection. It is about understanding what happens inside his mind when he discovers that your heart is no longer something he can control, access, or take for granted whenever he wants. If you are ready to understand the hidden emotional changes that happen when your dignity becomes stronger than your attachment, stay with this message until the end. Share your thoughts and experiences because many people need to hear this truth at the right moment in their lives. When this internal transformation occurs, the entire dynamic between two people begins to change. The relationship does not remain the same because the foundation has shifted. The person who once depended on your constant availability suddenly has to face the reality that your love is no longer something guaranteed. There are several important mental stages that a man often experiences when he notices that your self-respect has finally taken control of the situation. His mind moves from confusion to discomfort to reflection, and eventually toward the realization that the balance between you has completely changed. This journey represents a complete reversal of the emotional power that once existed between both people. If you stop listening before reaching the deeper parts of this message, you may miss the most important realization of the entire process. The final stage is what separates someone who continues repeating the same painful patterns from someone who has finally learned how to protect their own emotional identity. This is not simply about ending a relationship or creating distance. It is about a person discovering that their own peace, dignity, and inner stability cannot be sacrificed for the approval of another human being. This is much deeper than an ordinary discussion about love and relationships. It is about understanding what happens when someone stops losing themselves while trying to keep someone else. It is about the moment when you recognize that love should never require you to constantly prove your value, accept disrespect, or silence your own needs. The well-known psychologist Carl Jung often explored the idea that people cannot truly connect with others until they begin confronting the hidden parts of themselves. He believed that every person carries unconscious patterns, fears, and inner conflicts that influence the way they behave in relationships. That is exactly what begins happening when your self-respect becomes stronger. Your transformation forces him to face parts of himself that he may have avoided for a long time. When your energy changes, he notices it even before he fully understands it. He may not immediately have the words to explain what feels different, but he senses that something has shifted. The way you communicate changes. The way you respond changes. The way you carry yourself changes. The emotional access he once had is no longer automatic. If these words connect with your personal experience, take a moment to reflect on your own journey and share your thoughts. Sometimes hearing the right message at the right time can completely change the way you understand love, attachment, and your own personal boundaries. The first major shift begins when he realizes that you are no longer someone who can be emotionally negotiated with. This does not mean that you become cold, cruel, or incapable of love. It means you finally understand that your love should exist alongside your self-respect, not in place of it. Many people believe that someone realizes they are losing you only when you physically walk away. They imagine that the distance, the silence, or the absence is what creates the realization. But often, that is not the moment when the deepest change happens. A person truly understands your value when they recognize that they no longer have the ability to control your emotions or influence your choices through the same methods they used before. The change is not created by one dramatic conversation or one powerful statement. It is created through a quiet internal decision. It happens when you stop trying to convince someone to see your worth because you finally see it yourself. It happens when your own dignity becomes more important than receiving temporary reassurance from another person. This transformation is often silent, but it is extremely powerful. He begins sensing the difference before he can clearly identify it. The same things that once worked on you no longer create the same reaction. The same behaviors that once caused you to chase, explain, or overthink no longer control your emotional state. Imagine the story of a woman named Chris Bull, someone known for being deeply caring, loyal, and emotionally devoted to the people she loved. From the outside, many people believed she carried herself with confidence because she never begged for attention or desperately chased after anyone. She appeared to have strong dignity and self-control. However, internally, she was constantly making sacrifices that went against her own values. She would compromise her feelings, ignore her discomfort, and convince herself that patience was the same thing as understanding. She spent years creating explanations for someone else's absence, forgiving repeated disappointments, and accepting small betrayals because she wanted to preserve peace. She believed that being a good partner meant always being available, always understanding, and always willing to adjust. Without realizing it, she was teaching the other person that her boundaries were flexible and that her needs could continue being placed second. Then one day, something changed within her. It was not a dramatic argument. It was not a sudden act of revenge. It was simply a moment where she recognized that she could no longer continue abandoning herself to maintain a connection. She stopped explaining every choice she made. She stopped trying to prove why her feelings were valid. She stopped searching for approval before trusting her own judgment. She did not need to create a scene or make a dramatic exit. She simply stopped doing the small things that caused her to betray her own identity. This invisible internal shift completely changed the energy between them. When a person finally returns to their own center, they stop sending messages of desperation. They stop silently asking, "Will you choose me?" and begin standing firmly in the belief that they must choose themselves first. That is when he begins feeling the difference. He experiences the loss of access to the emotional closeness he once assumed would always be available. He notices that your attention is no longer something he can automatically receive whenever he wants it. His first reaction is usually not immediate fear. Instead, it is confusion and discomfort. Something feels different, but he may not understand exactly what has changed. He feels that your silence has become stronger. He feels that your presence carries more confidence. He feels that your boundaries are no longer temporary reactions, but permanent reflections of your self-worth. Your boundaries no longer appear like a wall built from anger or resentment. They become a clear statement of who you are and what you will accept. This forces him to stop avoiding reality and start looking honestly at his place in your life. When a woman stops being emotionally negotiable, a man is forced to face a reality he was not expecting. He may not immediately believe that he has lost her completely, but he begins realizing that he has lost the comfortable position he once held. The control he thought he had is no longer there. And that realization creates a deep psychological shift because he begins understanding that your love was never valuable because it was easy to receive. Your love was valuable because it came from someone with a strong heart, clear boundaries, and the ability to walk away from anything that destroys her peace. This transformation happens when you make three powerful inner shifts that completely reshape the way you see yourself and your entire life. You stop staying in situations, relationships, or environments that cause your body to feel trapped, uncomfortable, anxious, or limited. You begin recognizing that your peace matters, and you no longer ignore the signals your own mind and body are sending you. You stop trying to explain your heart, your feelings, and your intentions to someone who has repeatedly shown that they are unwilling or unable to truly listen, understand, or appreciate your perspective. You realize that constantly proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it only drains your own energy. Instead of fighting to be understood, you choose to honor yourself. You start making decisions that protect your emotional well-being, your happiness, and your personal growth, even if those choices are not what he expects or wants from you. You understand that choosing yourself is not an act of selfishness, and it does not mean you care any less. It simply means you have finally learned that your own needs deserve attention too. When you begin living this way, you are not becoming cruel, heartless, or distant. You are becoming honest, grounded, and deeply aware of your own value. True clarity can feel uncomfortable to someone who was once comfortable with your uncertainty, your hesitation, and the moments when you constantly adjusted yourself to keep them satisfied. A man will begin paying closer attention to his words, his actions, and even the timing of his decisions because he realizes he can no longer depend on your endless patience and unlimited flexibility. He understands that the person standing before him is no longer someone who will accept anything just to maintain a connection. This becomes the true beginning of genuine respect because real respect is not created by begging for attention or constantly giving more. It is built through self-worth, emotional strength, and the courage to remain loyal to who you truly are. Many women misunderstand dignity and believe it means becoming cold, distant, or impossible to reach. But dignity is not about shutting your heart down. It is about staying connected to yourself while still being capable of love. It is about becoming a complete person who does not abandon herself in order to keep someone else close. She did not become emotionally unavailable or suddenly stop caring about him. Instead, she became whole again. She stopped living as a divided person who was constantly choosing between her own happiness and his approval. This change made him question where exactly he belonged in her life because he could no longer assume that everything would revolve around him. He began noticing that she had her own dreams, her own direction, and her own identity outside of the relationship. Now you are no longer spending every moment reacting to what he does, what he says, or how he behaves. You are simply present in your own existence. You are no longer following the shadow of someone who may or may not choose you. Instead, you are creating the kind of life, love, and future that you genuinely desire. This new way of being removes the ability for someone to keep you around only when it is convenient for them or when they need comfort, attention, or emotional support. Your presence becomes something meaningful, not something automatically available whenever they feel like returning. If you are ready to understand how to maintain your strength and hold your position without needing to say anything, recognize that the greatest power often comes from your actions rather than your explanations. Once your heart understands that love should not require endless suffering, emotional exhaustion, or constant sacrifice, you can never fully return to the person you used to be. Something inside you permanently changes. He begins to sense that he can no longer depend on your emotional vulnerability to receive everything he wants while giving very little in return. This realization places him at an important crossroads. He must either grow, mature, and become a better partner, or he must accept that he can no longer remain in a connection where he refuses to evolve. Either outcome comes from one simple decision: you returning to yourself and reconnecting with your own inner strength. You do not have to physically walk away from a place to stop being treated as an option. You do not have to disappear completely to regain your power. You only need to return to your own spirit, your own values, and your own sense of identity. When you do this, the relationship between the two of you is no longer held together only by your effort, your sacrifices, and your constant attempts to make things work. The connection begins to reveal its true foundation. The second shift is the reason your dignity creates a deeper level of respect than all the love you may have given in the past. This truth may feel difficult to accept, but love without a strong foundation eventually becomes something people take for granted. What truly changes the way a man sees you is not the amount of love you provide, but the strength of character you show while loving him. When your love exists alongside confidence, boundaries, and self-respect, he can no longer view your presence as something ordinary or guaranteed. Giving more love does not always create stronger commitment. Sometimes giving endlessly simply creates a comfortable routine where one person receives everything while the other person slowly loses pieces of themselves. Dignity changes the entire dynamic because it forces him to recognize you as a complete individual with your own journey, your own goals, and your own direction. Carl Jung explained that the human mind naturally respects things that have clear structure, identity, and boundaries. When you establish healthy limits, another person understands there are certain lines they cannot cross without consequences. He begins comparing the woman you are today with the version of you who once waited endlessly for his messages, his attention, or his approval. Before this transformation, your love may have felt completely guaranteed to him. He never had to question whether he could lose your time, your energy, or your emotional availability. But now, your heart and your presence are no longer something he can simply assume will always be there. They become something valuable that must be appreciated, respected, and cared for every single day. He begins asking himself important questions. Is he willing to change his behavior? Is he willing to become the kind of person who deserves a place beside you? Or will he continue repeating patterns that slowly push you away? This is not a psychological game or a method of controlling someone's emotions. Manipulation is about changing yourself only to receive a reaction from another person. Dignity is completely different because it is about transforming yourself because you finally understand your own worth. Your energy no longer begs for his attention because you are already investing that attention into your own healing, your own dreams, and your own life. In many relationship discussions, people often say that their partner feels different and that things were easier before. But comfort and ease are not always signs of deep love. Sometimes something being easy simply means someone had unlimited access without needing to show responsibility, effort, or emotional growth. The moment when he begins noticing your change is often the moment when many women feel tempted to return to their old behavior. When he starts showing more interest because he senses he might lose you, the desire to go back to what feels familiar can become extremely strong. But if dignity is only being used as a temporary method to get his attention, it will eventually disappear because it was never rooted in your true identity. Your self-respect must become part of who you are, not just a temporary approach designed to create a certain response from him. This is where the relationship stops being based on imagination and begins becoming a real choice between two individuals who consciously choose each other. Your dignity does not guarantee that he will remain forever, but it does guarantee something far more important. You will never abandon yourself again. And surprisingly, that promise you make to yourself is often the very thing that creates the strongest impact on how someone sees you. If this realization changed the way you view love and self-worth, share your transformation in the comments. You are no longer the person waiting to be chosen, tested, or evaluated by him. Instead, he becomes the person who must decide whether he is capable of meeting the level of respect, honesty, and emotional maturity you now require. This kind of respect is not created by pretending to be powerless or waiting for someone else to validate you. It is created by remaining calm, confident, clear, and committed to walking your own path. When you stop responding from a place of pain, fear, or desperation, he loses the ability to control your emotions and influence your reactions. Your dignity creates an impression that stays deeply connected to a person's memory and can never easily be removed or forgotten. You become someone he recognizes as a woman of value and strength, someone he respects and looks up to, rather than simply another person from his past. Some men will use this experience as a reason to improve themselves, while others will choose to escape because facing the truth about themselves feels too uncomfortable. Either way, you are no longer sacrificing your peace or your identity just to keep someone beside you. The third stage begins when his respect for you slowly transforms into a quiet fear of losing you. This is not an immature fear or the kind of worry a child experiences. It is the fear of an adult who suddenly realizes that they may not be enough for someone they deeply value. He wants to move closer to you, but at the same time, he becomes afraid that his weaknesses, mistakes, and inconsistencies will be exposed. He may begin sending messages that feel unclear or unpredictable. He may act distant one moment and interested the next, simply to observe how you react. He is trying to discover whether the old version of you is still waiting beneath the surface, the version that chased answers, offered endless reassurance, or fought to keep the connection alive. But when he notices that you are no longer searching for his attention, approval, or explanations, something inside him begins to shift. His uncertainty grows because he can no longer calm himself by depending on your emotional reactions. He has to sit with his own thoughts, his own choices, and his own behavior without using you as a source of comfort or validation. For many people, facing themselves honestly can be one of the most challenging experiences they ever encounter. Do not confuse sudden passion, dramatic promises, or unexpected gestures with genuine love. Sometimes these actions are not coming from a place of true transformation, but from a desire to regain the control that was lost. Your responsibility in this moment is not to chase, convince, or repair everything. Your responsibility is to remain grounded, peaceful, and connected to your own life. When you stop rushing to fill every silence with explanations or emotional energy, he is forced to recognize the emptiness he has been avoiding. Your dignity brings clarity to the relationship and reveals the reality of what both of you are truly dealing with. Love that comes from respect seeks honesty, stability, and consistency. Love that comes from insecurity often searches for constant reassurance and proof of safety. By staying centered within yourself, you naturally separate those who are ready for a healthy and mature connection from those who are not. He becomes the one paying attention to every conversation, every action, and every word he chooses. He no longer sees your heart as something he automatically owns. Instead, he understands that being part of your life is something he must earn through effort, respect, and genuine change. This independence is exactly what makes you more valuable and more attractive in his eyes. However, this is also a difficult moment because your natural emotions may tempt you to return to old patterns. When you see him feeling lost, hurt, or confused, you may feel the urge to become the person who saves him, comforts him, or carries his struggles. But if you return to that role, the same pattern of disappointment, imbalance, and emotional exhaustion can begin again. If you remain strong and consistent, a completely different relationship dynamic has the opportunity to develop. You are not being cold or cruel by protecting your boundaries. You are simply honoring the person you have grown into. Your consistency forces him to make a decision about the kind of person he truly wants to become. He will either rise to the moment and work toward becoming a better version of himself, or he will slowly remove himself because he cannot meet the level of maturity you now represent. Dignity does not shrink itself to make someone else comfortable. You do not need threats, anger, or dramatic actions to prove your worth. You only need to stop lowering yourself into situations that no longer match the person you have become. This decision protects you from years of wasted energy and emotional pain because it reveals who is truly capable of standing beside you. The fourth stage arrives when he finally accepts that the past cannot be recreated and that things cannot simply return to the way they once were. The woman who once tried endlessly to make him happy, who ignored her own needs, and who constantly adjusted herself for his comfort, is no longer there. He may experience a deep sense of loss, not only because he misses you, but because he misses the ease and comfort he once received without having to give the same effort in return. You no longer carry his emotional burdens. You no longer defend his lack of effort or create explanations for his actions. If he chooses to remain in your life, he will have to approach you with a level of respect, honesty, and responsibility that he may have never shown before. He will begin understanding that keeping you requires growth because he knows he cannot continue the same way and expect you to stay.